Experience the epic series that the world is watching and raving about. Catch up or relive the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, now on HBO On Demand, and watch back-to-back episodes anytime on your schedule. This year, join the Legion of Followers and enjoy past seasons of Game of Thrones, plus the premiere of Season 4 on April 6th on HBO. Don't miss out. Sign up for HBO and get free access to HBO On Demand.
The F&M leader called for the National Intelligence Agency to be shut down. Bad implementation to cost Atlantis up to $10 million. Fire destroys a place of worship, plus a Bahamian businessman indicted in the U.S. We've got those stories and a whole lot more tonight. I'm Fonique Toot, and MB12 starts now. Topping news tonight, Free National Movement leader Dr. Hubert Minnis is demanding that the Christie administration shut down the controversial National Intelligence Agency. During a news conference held at F&M headquarters today, Minnis said implications of the agency's ability to gather information outside of a legal framework are both dangerous and unwarranted. Christina McNeil reports.
Free National Movement leader Dr. Hubert Minnis continuing to question the legality of the National Intelligence Agency, a top-secret agency he claims is spying on Bahamians. Dr. Minnis says the Bahamian public deserves to know what is being done with taxpayers' money and how their information is being stored and used.
We know that the organization is located on Nassau Street. We know who's head of the organization. We also know the staff complement of such an organization. The National Intelligence Agency consists of 14 Defense Force officers, 5 police officers, 3 customs officers, and 2 immigration officers.
Minnis claims that agency is located in a building on Nassau Street. When our news team visited the alleged headquarters, the gate was locked and there was only one car parked in front of the building. Minister of National Security Dr. Bernard Nottage recently told reporters that legislation for the NIA would be brought to Parliament and passed before the end of the year, conceding that there is no legal framework currently in place for the organization. Minnis today telling reporters he holds no faith that the Christie administration will meet its deadline to introduce legislation before the end of the year. He says they now have a rogue organization operating outside of the law with the power to gather personal information without having to report to any head of a uniform branch such as the Royal Bahamas Police or Defense Forces.
In the meantime, you have a rogue spy organization that's running rogue and collecting whatever they want to. We don't know what they're doing with this information. We also know that from history, looking at the PLP's history, they have never met any targeted deadline that they've given. Now they can obtain and gather information, personal as well as non-personal information on you, media, members of the press, on politicians, the F&M, and use it for other purposes.
Ideally, Minnis says the laws should have been set before the agency began operations. He says not only should government reveal what activities the agency is engaging in, but where the money for the agency is going.
In the budget, that $100,000 has been allotted to it. What I did not point out to you is the head of such an agency, Scavala, is being paid $72,500 per annum to run such an agency in addition to his pension.
Minnis says information about the agency should be made public and the Christie administration held accountable. He says the F&M will continue to push for the implementation of the Freedom of Information Act to facilitate the free flow of information. Reporting for NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.
The country's largest private employer could be forced to shell out up to $10 million to convert its software to meet the demands of a new value-added tax regime. That figure is a dramatic increase from the $500,000 which Atlantis officials initially budgeted back in September 2013. A senior executive was quite candid when asked at what rate VAT should be introduced.
0. What answer were you expecting me to give?
As finance officials mull over VAT implementation, the president and managing director of Atlantis Paradise Island says he would prefer a taxation rate of 0%. VAT was set to be introduced at 15%, but it will now be significantly lower. Regardless of the figure, George Marcantonus says preparing for the proposed tax will cost the resort millions.
I don't feel great about the fact that we're going to have VAT, just simply because in our case, Atlantis, we estimate that our costs are going to be in the range of $5 million to $10 million to convert our existing software systems.
Marcantonus says government avoided a chaotic situation when it announced that VAT implementation would be postponed.
I know that we could never, at Atlantis, have met a July 1st implementation date. Not because we wouldn't have the will, but just simply because we have so many different software systems here that after discussing this with our suppliers, we realized it would take us 8 to 14 months to convert the software to be able to handle a VAT system across the numerous revenue streams we have here.
After speaking with the resort's North American suppliers, the senior hotel executive says Atlantis will have a difficult time preparing for VAT by the end of this year. He noted it's hard to plan with no definitive implementation date, taxation rate, or even an idea of exemptions. That being said, Marcantonus says tourism stakeholders understand they have to make a contribution.
The country can't just survive on zero income, and we understand that. And we take our role in this community very seriously. You're not going to see us marching around demanding things if we don't have alternatives to offer. It's easy to criticize. It's not that easy to say, why don't we do this instead?
In other news, Financial Services Minister Ryan Pinder says he endorses a web shop boss's move to offer shares to the public. However, he says it is still unclear how or when government will begin taxing web shops. Jasmine Bonamy has the story.
Customers of Island Luck may soon be the first to own shares in the company. With regulation of the numbers industry in sight, the web shop's CEO, Sebastien Bastien, says it wants to expand their operations, attract a wider audience, and empower Bahamians through a share offering. In a press statement, Bastien noted that being one of the only industries in the country not dominated by foreign interests, its long-term vision is to preserve and grow the industry for all Bahamians wishing to own a piece of the pie. Bastien anticipates that share offerings could be realized by early 2015. Government is still working on legislation to legitimize and tax numbers gambling. Today, Pinder said he would absolutely endorse this, but before that measure is taken, Pinder says the government must first decide how it will tax web shops. He says several ideas have been discussed, including taxing the web shop winnings, which he says would be a type of income tax.
You have to ultimately discuss tax policy when it comes down to it. Do you only tax the play, similar to a business license, or do you tax the play and the winnings? You have to really look from a tax policy and discuss the pros and cons of it. From a tax policy point of view, those discussions have not extended beyond just discussions, nothing to the point of decisions. And nothing to the point of percentages that you would charge, because if you tax the play and the winning, certainly the rate will be lower. If you tax only the play, the rate will be higher. So those are all functions of discussion on tax policy with respect to the industry.
Pinder quickly added that no clear-cut decision has been made on how those taxes would be applied to web shops.
There are a lot of numbers that are being discussed, whether it be $400 million in play or more than $400 million in play. That seems to be the number that's discussed the most. I've been told if it's $400 million in play, the winning percentage is about 30%. So you can do the math there.
Once regulated, web shops would have to comply with the obligations of the Securities Commission and the associated laws in order to offer shares. Pinder says regularizing and causing compliance and due diligence are necessary to meet international best practices.
It's imperative to regulate. As I said before, any type of activity that is unregulated risks going into other regulated types of activity. and regulated activities which are consistent with international best practices. People say, for instance, financial services. You want to make sure that any significant component of your economy has a regulatory framework, especially when it has concerns such as money laundering concerns, international compliance with due diligence requirements. You could only achieve those through a regulated industry.
Now, Gaming Minister Obi Wilshcombe confirmed during a press conference last week that web shops would be regularized by July 1st. Reporting for NV12 News, I'm Jasmine Bonamy.
Arson is suspected in an early morning blaze that destroyed a church on Marshall Road. The building was not insured and had only been open a month following thousands of dollars worth of renovations. Pastor Larrick Kemp of Miracle Faith Praying Station says a parishioner in the area noticed the blaze shortly after 4 a.m.
So we got here about shortly after 4:15 to find the church in flames, and it's so, I don't know what to say. I've been totally speechless, and this is to find a pastor speechless, that's, it's unheard of.
When our news team arrived on the scene today, fire officials were inspecting the church. Kemp says he's no detective, but he believes the fire is linked to a disturbance at the church yesterday, which resulted in police being called in and the building's locks being changed. Kemp says he is shocked that someone would set the fire to the place of worship.
This is not a person's house. It's the house of God. It's where God resides, and so for anyone to do this, definitely they are suspecting arson. It just goes to show where our nation is headed, to where we say we're a God-fearing country, but yet we're putting fire to the house of God, so it just shows where we're headed, and we need help.
Kemp says the fire will not stop the work of the church, adding his congregation will rebuild as soon as possible. The westbound lane of John F. Kennedy Drive was closed for half an hour this afternoon as firefighters battled a blaze that ripped through a bus. The Dan Knowles tour bus was left charred along the side of the road when the blaze was extinguished. The cause of the fire is under investigation, but according to photos taken by eyewitnesses, it began in the front of the bus. Our news team understands the bus driver was not injured. It is unclear if there were any passengers on board the vehicle at the time of the fire, and company representatives were unavailable for comment up to airtime. When NB12 returns, the Prime Minister talks finance reform, plus the Bahamas government condemns the abduction of Nigerian schoolgirls. So stay with us.